Super Bowl 37. It is Tampa Bay versus the Oakland Raiders. Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with it. Heads intercepted at the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 29. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl.
Tom Brady signing with the Tampa Bay Bucs tomorrow. Holy hell.
Everyone always says, why the Bucs, man? Why do you choose the Bucs? And it was a no-brainer.
Brady has all kinds of time. Throws toward the end zone. It is a caught ball. Touchdown, Tampa Bay, Mike Evans. 8 seconds, 7 seconds. Brady to throw. Throws a deep pass downfield. Got Scotty Miller in the open. Makes the catch. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Super Bowl 55 will be underway at Raymond James Stadium. Here's the snap out of the gun. Play action fake pass to Gronkowski. He's going to score a touchdown. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Holy guacamole. Bucs are the Super Bowl champs. They can't stop the clock. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. And today, we are going to take a look at what has been a productive free agency period for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, a big signing in the secondary this week to kick things off here on the show, but we are going to go move by move, if you will, and give it a letter grade. It is the free agency grade edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. But before we get back into that, Evan, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good, and no longer have the beautiful picture of my face. So now back on video. So happy to be there. Now I can show my true reactions to everything, which hasn't been smiling the entire time, but hey, it's a good picture. So yeah, definitely good to be back on video and good to be finally grading the Bucs free agency. I put out an article actually on BucsNation.com I think last week actually talking about the grades, but we have a few new signings to talk about here. So that will, since the last time we recorded it happened, but also not even mentioned in my article because they hadn't happened at the time. So some activity from the Bucs here lately.
Yeah, we're about to ramp up our draft coverage on the other side of this pod today. And we've had your smiling face here on the show the last few weeks. You've had a lot to smile about. Hopefully today, going over the free agency acquisitions for Tampa Bay, we have a lot more to smile about looking ahead into 2023. But the latest signing, the one that we hinted to start the show, Ryan Neal, the former Seattle Seahawk, and something that we had talked about on last week's episode of the show was that absence of a true strong safety presence for the Bucs, right? Antoine Winfield is good playing the nickel. He's a good free safety, however you want to use him. Even attacking the quarterback, he can get after it. But, he's not the strongest run support guy. And it seemed like between Keanu Neal and Logan Ryan, who both played, serviceably for the Bucs last season, that run support was not there. And at the end of the day, I think that strong safety presence that you're looking for with the absence of Keanu Neal and Mike Edwards as well, you get that in Ryan Neal. The Bucs signed him to a 1-year contract, and after stepping in as a starter for the Seahawks in Week 5, he didn't allow a single touchdown and just a 54.3% completion percentage as the primary coverage player on 35 targets. He was one of the highest graded safeties on PFF in 2022. The Bucs got some pretty good value with this signing, and to be honest with you, I think overall, it's one of those signings that's, going to be the most impactful when we look at this free agency class at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, the contract details aren't officially out yet, but the interesting story with Neal and his whole free agency was he was actually a restricted free agent that the Seahawks put a tender on originally. You can do that, and then if a team wants to sign you, just like it's similar in the NHL, NBA, and stuff, that team that wants to sign you has to give compensation to sign you. However, the Seahawks took away their tender, so that made him an unrestricted free agent. So that allowed the Bucs to kind of swoop in here and make the deal. So only 27 years old. It's not like this is a I'm not saying he's super young, but he's also not a veteran per se, a 30-plus-year-old guy. So if he plays well, he could be a guy with, to step into future plans as well. So I do think there's a lot of upside to it. And like you said, they needed that strong safety guy. And before that, Anton Winfield Jr. and Nolan Turner were the only two safeties on the roster. So they lost Keanu O'Neal, they lost Mike Edwards. Logan Ryan's still out there. There's a chance he can be back, I guess. But they were going to add some sort of safety, I think, to the mix, and they could even draft one pretty high in April's draft. So, which is crazy that it's almost 3 weeks away. But so yeah, we'll have to wait and see what they do with the rest of the safety position. But I mean, it's if history has shown us what the Bucs have done this free agency, they likely got Neal for a pretty good value.
Yeah, and a breakout season in 2022 is something a lot of people are talking about. And you mentioned his age, entering only his 5th season in the NFL. This is a guy that obviously does have the upside. What is your overall opinion of him as a player, though? Like, do you think this is ultimately going to be one of the better signings for the Bucs when we talk about it, a year from now and potential new free agents and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, like I talked about the upside, but at the same time, it's a smaller sample size. So I think you'd like to see maybe a little bit of bigger sample size, and we don't know what his role is officially going to be in Tampa Bay. So if the Bucs go out and draft a guy at strong safety, maybe that cuts into his playing time a little bit. So I'm not 100% sure if he's going to be a full-time starter or not, but I think he can be, and I think his play in Seattle last year earned him the opportunity. To get more playing time wherever he went, whether he stayed in Seattle, whether he, now he's in Tampa Bay. So I do think there is, like I said, there's upside where if he hits, you could find a legit starter that, you may have to pay next year, sure. But I mean, it's better than having to go out and try and find that guy. So hopefully, a hole here is filled.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what kind of role he does end up having in a Todd Bowles defense because, he filled in for Jamal Adams after his season was over in Seattle. So it's like, the role that he stepped into, obviously big shoes, but again, breakout season in 2022 and given a lot of people a lot to be excited about. It doesn't quite feel like a high risk, high reward signing. I don't want to say that because I do think this guy is going to blossom into a solid player. And I think it's, when you compare him to a Keanu Neal, I feel like it's almost a lateral move and maybe could have more upside, if he does develop.
I think it definitely has more upside. I think.
Yeah.
I think Keanu Neal was a guy I wanted back, but I think this move has more upside than that because there's just you said he's only in his 5th season. Like this guy isn't as experienced, so maybe there is something else to unlock there.
Yeah, so if I had to slap a letter grade on it, I feel optimistic, and again, I feel like this is going to be one of the more underrated signings in the grand scheme of things. I know we all get excited about the quarterback and getting to watch that competition, but the secondary needed some help. They got a serviceable, strong safety with some upside. I will give it an A, just an A. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll go with a B plus. Just because I don't think it's their only move at safety. So like I just don't know how much he's gonna play. But like I said, the upside is there. So and don't know the exact contract details, but it's not gonna be a ton. So yeah, I would go with a B plus. I was thinking A minus, and I think either one is fine. I think your A grade is fine as well because he showed out last year. Like he was one of the better players on that Seattle defense, and Seattle's defense wasn't great last year, but kind of came out of the blue and really played well. So hopefully he can continue that. So like you said, words are hard. So
Yeah, it's all right. Before last week's episode, we had talked for, what felt like months. I think as soon as we started talking about potential releases for Tampa Bay, Ryan Suckup was one of those potential releases. It took a little bit of time, but since the last time we talked to you, the greatest number 3 in franchise history is no longer a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. So thank you, Ryan Suckup, for everything. I mean, the guy is the model of consistency under 50 yards. And to be honest with you, when you don't have an offense that is number 1 in the NFL at moving the football and scoring in the red zone, you kind of get to see where a kicker like that can come to be exposed. He was getting a little bit older. He was making a lot of money as well under the Buccaneers payroll, so they had to part ways. They bring in former Colts kicker Chase McLaughlin, who is entering his 5th NFL season, obviously following the trend of getting younger in a lot of different positions. During the 2022 season with the Colts, McLaughlin recorded a career-high 30 field goals, which was good for 8th most in the NFL and topped kickers who did not appear in all 17 games. He also totaled 9 field goals from 50 or more yards, which is a single season franchise record for the Colts. And when you compare it to Ryan Suckup from 50 plus yards in 2022, he went 2 for 7, which was obviously a weak point for the Bucs at more than 1 point during the season. You know, with a career percentage like he has, I gotta say, I don't think it's going to be a foregone conclusion that McLaughlin is your week 1 starter. At least right now, I think there is, a chance the Bucs look at bringing in a legitimate leg for training camp. I know Jose Borregales is doing his thing in the XFL right now, but I'm sure there's going to be a camp invite waiting for him down the road somewhere, if not someone else who could come in and bring the heat there. But, looking at what happened here, I know that you got to bank on range because, like I said, Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask, it's not Tom Brady. This offense, even with Tom Brady, was not a sure thing in 2022, and your kicking game was exposed. So you gotta get a little more of a younger leg in there, and that's what they get. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't feel the easiest about it, especially because the Bucs were victims of kicking troubles for so long, and I kind of thought we got away from that for a little bit. So my relief is halted for a minute until we see what this kicking competition looks like. But I'm going to go ahead and give this move a B. I think he got better in some ways and maybe worse in others at the kicking position.
Yeah, I'll go with a B too. Yeah, it's fine. And like you said, I do agree that like it's no guarantee that he's like the guy. Because I do think they could bring in someone else. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a veteran free agent, but I know people are going to hate this, but I do think they could use a draft pick on a kicker. I mean, they have, I think, 3 6th-round picks and a 7th-round pick. So, I mean, you could easily use one of them on a kicker. And there's a couple this year that are kind of worthy of being drafted. Like you see a lot of kickers being undrafted free agents and stuff. There's probably 3 or 4 that like have a legit shot to be drafted. Luckily there's no kicker that's going to be drafted on day 2 by the Buccaneers, but there's a shot that on day 3, you just take a flyer on somebody. Like I said, you got 4 picks in the last 2 rounds. Take one of them. I mean, that could be a starter right there. That's technically a starter. So, yeah, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, like you said, that McLaughlin is going to be the guy. However, he does provide longer range than Suckup did, and like what Suckup did for the franchise shouldn't ever be forgotten because, I mean, he was huge, especially during the Super Bowl run, not missing a field goal, only missing 1 extra point. Like, he was huge. But, uh, age kind of catches up. If you saw the numbers, they started to go down each year. And just, I think it was time to move on. They had some salary cap troubles, and you brought up the best point. Like, even with Tom Brady, the offense wasn't getting as close to the red zone or, to make those short field goals as possible. They're going to need a guy with some range because there's no guarantee, they're going to be, only kicking 38-yard field goals because the offense likely won't be as good. So, like, they're going to have some times where they're going to need their kicker to make a 54-yarder. Like, and just towards the end there was no confidence in Ryan Suckup. And honestly, I don't know why the Bucs kept trotting him out there to attempt them, because it was clear, like, some of the attempts were ugly too. And it was clear that, like, it wasn't going to work. So kudos to Suckup, hats off to him. But yeah, time to move on.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's career high, I think, is 53 yards. He's not getting any younger, and just like we had talked about, the cap situation. So easy move for the Bucs, and hopefully we get to see another legitimate kicking competition as the anxiety sets in for the people who have witnessed a lot of kickers come and go here in Tampa Bay. So hopefully we can find a legitimate answer by week 1 of the NFL season. The next guy we're going to talk about here and put a grade on, it kind of starts a trend of something I'm going to mention a lot, and I feel like it's obviously going to be a key word in this Bucs free agency given the cap limitations that they have. But that key word is value, and I think that's something that's going to help the Bucs out in the grand scheme of things when you evaluate this free agency, because are they hitting home runs with guaranteed talented guys like they have the last few years? No, absolutely not, because they don't have the resources for it. But given what they have brought in, I do think they made it out of things relatively unscathed. Granted, the second largest cap hit in NFL history they had to endure to kick off the offseason. So Baker Mayfield, we will get to watch Tampa Bay's first quarterback battle in over a decade with the addition of former number 1 overall pick, Mr. Baker Mayfield. And honestly, everything has been said on this podcast about Baker on both ends of the spectrum, right? I mean, the conversation has been wore out by this point. You know what the upside is with this guy. He's a former number 1 overall pick for a reason. You look at what, some of the good he was able to do in Cleveland. Not a lot he was able to do in Carolina, but, he really, really, in a league that relies on recency bias, he really changed some people's minds with what he was able to do in LA. Granted, it was a short time and he didn't have a lot of time to learn the playbook or get included in that organization, but he went out there and he balled the best he could, right? So I think all of that to say, my favorite thing about Baker is that it's finally some worthwhile competition for Kyle Trask. And that's going to be the most exciting part of camp this year. We're going to be in the middle of summer watching Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield go at it. These are two guys who want to play. And, I wanted to ask really quickly before we get into the Baker signing, just some rumbling and I don't know the source that this came from. I saw it on Joe Bucs Fan, so take it for what you will. I guess Kyle Trask had voiced some level of frustration with the signing of Baker Mayfield. I don't know if you've heard anything about that. I mean, is that a whole nothing burger that I also expect it to be? Because if anybody knew that they were going to be signing some competition this year, it seems like it would be Kyle Trask. So I can't imagine why he would be too upset with the acquisition of a guy like Baker.
Yeah, I haven't personally heard anything like that. Yeah, like you just said, I shouldn't come as a surprise that they're going to sign somebody else. I mean, yeah, you should have the mindset of wanting to beat him out. So it shouldn't really matter who they sign. Like, you should have that mindset that you're going to beat the guy out. So if that is true, it's not great for Kyle Trask, because you shouldn't be worrying about that at all. You should be worrying about yourself. Don't worry about that guy. Beat him out then. Just be better than him. So, I haven't heard anything. I haven't personally heard that, but yeah, it will be a true quarterback competition. And we talked about this on the show, I think right after sort of Baker was signed, maybe even before he was signed, that no matter who they brought in, it was going to be the first real competition since I don't know, when,
Never.
Kyle
Trask is
no, but I'm saying in Bucs, the past, Josh Freeman was pretty much the guy,
yeah.
Right? There was they drafted Mike Glennon, sure, but 2013 it was Josh Freeman, sure. 2014 they signed Josh McCown, Mike Glennon was there, but Josh McCown was a starter. 2015 Jameis Winston, 2016 Jameis Winston, 2017 Jameis Winston, 2018 Jameis Winston, 2019 Jameis Winston, and in 2020 it's Tom Brady. So this is the first time that they're having the QB1 thing. There is nobody with, maybe I think Baker Mayfield probably has the edge, but there's nobody with oh yeah, he's probably going to win it. It is truly, I think, how these guys are going to perform in this offense. So we'll see.
Yeah, obviously some new variables in the mix. It's not a Byron Leftwich offense anymore. It's not a Bruce Arians long developing route, need the best O-line in the world kind of playbook. So, you hope Dave Canales can really bring the best out of some of these young guys. But let me ask as well, while we are on the topic of best case scenario here, right? Best case scenario in the signing of Baker Mayfield, even for Kyle Trask, the best case scenario here is that either one of these guys live up to a little bit of that potential that they have. Right? I think if the Bucs can come out of this with a fairly competent quarterback at the end of the day who can win them a couple of games, then maybe you'll have more answers than questions headed into the offseason next year, however that shakes out. But, another thing I wanted to talk about very briefly before we give a grade on Baker Mayfield. I had heard this mentioned. I had seen it on social media, and it was kind of an interesting question. When we talk about this offense, and obviously the quarterback comes into play. We'll get into the running back later. But this offense as a whole, is it fair for people to expect improvement? Or is that just is that just kind of a wild concept? Because I can obviously see both sides of the argument here. It's Dave Canales who, doesn't have Tom Brady, but a lot of people would probably be quick to say is arguably a better offensive coordinator than Byron Leftwich. In 2022 was a much better offensive coordinator than Byron Leftwich.
He
Um,
wasn't the offensive coordinator though.
that
That's
is
the thing.
true. That is true.
You don't
Yeah.
know.
You don't know.
That's the
You
variable. It's
don't
the unknown.
know. So a fresh face at offensive coordinator. This is obviously his first shot, but everyone attributes what he was able to do with Geno and saying that he'll be a natural fit. I have a lot of faith in Canales. But, certain positions, certain things about this team, not saying they're going to go out there and win more games. Not saying they're going to go out there and win the NFC South. I'm not saying the Bucs are going to be projected to win more than 10 games this year. But it's like, if they drop off, how much are they going to drop off? Because it's a lot of new going on in this offense. So if they get marginally better, even if they are a worse football team overall, but if they get marginally better on offense with a defense that played as well as they did in 2022, I mean, listen, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket here, but what I'm trying to ask you is, it doesn't seem as crazy as one would first think to expect this offensive unit to improve in 23.
No, but like I said, it's that unknown. It's who's the quarterback. You have a first time offensive coordinator play caller in the NFL. You're gonna have a lot of change along the offensive line. So I mean, yeah, Shaq
It's a lot
Mason's
of
not there.
uncertainty. I will say that.
Yeah.
I failed to mention that part. There's obviously a lot of upside if everything goes well.
Yeah,
But
and Shaq Mason's not there. Donovan Smith's not there. Leonard Fournette's not there. It's I mean, the only consistent thing is the wide receivers. The wide receivers are still there. So, yeah, it's tough because when you talk about that and you say, okay, well, if the offense gets marginally better, maybe they are a worse football team. That doesn't bode well for the defense then, because I mean they went 8-9 with
right.
pretty brutal offense, and the defense really carried them. So if the offense gets better, you would think that like naturally the team's going to win more than 8 games, right? I mean, you can't predict injuries and stuff, but you would hope.
That's the logic, right? And I mean, it doesn't sound crazy. It really doesn't. And when you give this defense the credit they deserve, I think going into 23, regardless of what the offense looks like, I mean, it hopefully shouldn't, but it could look like a dumpster fire, but this defense is still pretty damn good. And I think the Bucs could win more games than people would give them credit for. But that's neither here nor there. We'll get into that a little bit more deeper as the offseason goes on. But let's get in. Actually, let's put a letter grade on Baker Mayfield. We never officially said. I gave it B minus because it's not the best free agent quarterback they could have got. Everyone knows that I am a Minshew mark. I mean, I would have loved to see Minshew mania running wild in Tampa Bay, but we can't always get what we want. I know you may have been a little higher on someone like Jacoby Brissett, who ends up going to Washington. So what do you make of Baker Mayfield as that free agent QB we had talked about all offseason?
I would give it a B, I think, just because I mean, they basically got him for $4 million. Like I was expecting the deal to be a little bit more. So, and I thought maybe it could be a 2-year deal even, but it's a 1-year deal. There's very little risk. Like the only way it's $8.5 million is if he reaches those incentives, and the way he reaches those incentives is by playing. So if he doesn't win the job, he doesn't get them. So it's very, very low risk. So there's not much there. So I think it's fine. Like, is it a unbelievable deal? No. Like, was there some better options? Maybe, but like realistically speaking, I think the Bucs sort of did the best job they could with the hand they were given. So, we knew that, especially once Tom Brady's cap hit of $35 million was going to be absorbed this year. You kind of knew that, like, yeah, they weren't going to be in that Derek Carr market or the Lamar Jackson market or the Aaron Rodgers or really, or even like another tier down, like a Jimmy Garoppolo. Like they weren't going to be in that sort of market. So I think they got one of the better guys with. Here's the thing about versus Brissett, and Minshew also falls into this category with Mayfield as well versus Brissett. Brissett, you know what you got. It's a safer option, but Minshew and Mayfield have the more upside, and I still think Mayfield has more upside than Minshew does, simply because he was a #1 overall pick for a reason.
I can't co-sign with it, cousin. I'm sorry.
How many times did Minshew take his team to the playoffs?
Can't do it. I can't do it. Can't do it.
Okay, that's fine. It's fine. If he didn't have the mustache, nobody would care about him. So,
if he didn't have the mustache,
if he didn't have the mustache, nobody would care.
What was the name of that old? Was it Kyle Orton, who was like a weird looking guy for a little while? He looked like
Yeah,
a
Kyle Orton. Well, Kyle Orton had he had like the kind of the longish hair, and he had the mustache and the stuff. But then Charlie Whitehorse was the clipboard Jesus.
yeah.
So there's been a few guys that have had some pretty luscious locks there.
Can't forget Fitzpatrick, right? Just got to
Yeah, I
stay
mean the
humble,
beard,
baby,
just
rocking the beard
yeah.
in Tampa Bay. I mean, can never forget that. So let's get into the next free agent acquisition for the Bucs. Following the pattern of getting younger, this time along the defensive line, Big D tackle Greg Gaines, the former Rams defensive lineman. He was a starter, played a lot of games there, won a Super Bowl there. They signed him to a 1-year deal on they signed him to a 1-year deal. It was on a Monday, but I forgot to take that out of my notes. They reunited him with former teammate Vita Vea. I don't think he played with Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, did he?
I don't think so. I
think
so.
It might have been a year or two gap between those guys. But, something that we have talked about a lot over these last few weeks, especially on the defensive side of the ball and what we're going to see on the defensive line this upcoming season, the Bucs are just banking on more young talent, Gaines has been in the league for a couple of years, but he's definitely younger than some other guys they could have gone out and gotten. Still in his 20s, I believe. So,
yep.
Younger talent, fresh faces, and a prove-it deal for a guy who was a bona fide starter for, the Super Bowl champions of 56. So I like it. I gave it a B. I mean, younger, I don't want to say less developed, but, less of a sure thing than maybe some other guys they could have gotten. But for the price that they got him and for what they could have afforded, I like it.
Yeah. So I'm going to give it a B plus. I think it's really good. And he's only 26. So that's a key there too. Had 8.5 sacks the last 2 seasons. And was a rotational player, but he also was a starter at times for LA. So
Eight and a half sacks for a rotational DT, an interior guy is pretty good.
Over 2 years. And I mean, he's honestly considered a more of a run, not really a run stuffer, but a better run defender than pass rusher. But I've talked to a few people that think that his pass rush ability is pretty underrated. So he's got some potential there. And that's the thing you mentioned about the age thing, and that's what I like about this Bucs free agency. Sure, you can go after the veterans, the 31-year-old, 32-year-olds, Akeem Hicks and stuff like that, Julio Jones and everything. But there's also that market of those guys that are veterans, but they're young veterans. Ryan Neal, 27, Greg Gaines, 26, Baker Mayfield, 28. Chase Edmonds, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, is 26.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I like about it, is that these guys are veterans, but they're not old. They hopefully still have some juice left, because I think we can all agree. I think the Bucs were a very slow team last year. They explosive plays on offense, explosive plays on the defense. They didn't come because I think they were just very slow. So hopefully by getting those younger guys, they get a little bit more juice going. And I think a guy like Gaines could really help that. Am I expecting him to be a full-time starter? I think in an ideal world, probably not. Because I think he's best in his role as a rotational guy. I think he could be a guy, if you play him too much, maybe he starts to get exposed a little bit. He is a little bit undersized for that position. But I do think in his role, in a specific rotational role, this could be a tremendous value for the Bucs.
Yeah, and let's not forget, when you talk about the role that a guy like that is going to have on a Todd Bowles defense, as opposed to maybe any other defense in the NFL, is that we cannot rule out the possibility of, watching him drop back into coverage 5-6 snaps this year, just like we've seen Vita Vea do and Ndamukong Suh. You know what I mean? He could line up as an outside linebacker, just standing up, looking at the right tackle for all we know. There's a lot of things that could be done. So, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, Todd Bowles open up his toolbook on the defense this year, but hopefully get the most out of a guy like Greg Gaines, getting younger along that defensive line. And another 5th-year edge rusher on that defensive line here. The Bucs were able to retain Anthony Nelson, 10.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons, and some pretty crucial plays down the stretch in 2022. Obviously, the big forced fumble in Seattle, I think, was play of the year for him. More rotational talent, but he's been fairly productive as rotational talent. And when we talk more and more about Shaq Barrett getting a little bit older, coming off of injury yet again. You hope to see some more positive development from a guy like Anthony Nelson, because I think later in the year, depending on the situation the Bucs are in, as the season goes on, I think you're going to see more and more of Nelson on the field. I think the snaps are just going to go up as the season goes on. So with that being said, I know the deal he got for what the Bucs could pay for a rotational edge rusher, it did seem a little rich at the time. So I think that's the only thing laying this down. If he blossoms into what the Bucs hope a fifth-year pass rusher can be, I would love to see it, because I'm a big fan of Anthony Nelson. I love the development over the last 2 years in particular. If we see some more of that in 2023, I think this could be better for the Bucs. But as of right now, with what you know about Nelson, with what you know about needing some help at the outside linebacker position, if you don't see that development, then this is a C plus for me. I know it's kind of stiff because I like Nelson a lot, but it was just rich, and value has kind of been a talking point so far.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a C. Doesn't have much to do with the player. It's just I just would have. It's not necessarily Nelson the player. It's Nelson the type of player. To me, a lot of his sacks, and yes, he's had the sack production, specifically the last 2 seasons, but a lot of the sacks have come when he's uncovered, and he just gets the guy first. So some botches on the offensive line, and sure, give Nelson credit there, sure. But at the same time, like, I don't know if he can keep up that sack production. If he does, it's a good deal. If he gets even better, it's a great deal. But I don't know if he's going to keep up that sack pace that he set. I don't know. So I would have preferred you, with the limited resources they had, to allocate that money somewhere else, to maybe a different type of player. I think they need more pass rush. And I just don't know if Nelson is going to provide the pass rushing upside that somebody else in the market could have. And I don't know who that name is, but you could have maybe made something else work if you didn't go get Nelson. And I don't hate the move. It's fine. You're rewarding your players. That is what it is. You are rewarding your players that you drafted and developed. That's a sign of a healthy organization. But it's just, I don't know. It's kind of nitpicking, but just would have preferred somebody maybe a little bit different. But it's not the end of the world. I do think he's going to play more so. I disagree with you a little bit. If he's playing in the middle of the season or later in the season more, that's trouble, because that means that either Shaq Barrett, one, isn't good or isn't responding to the injury, or Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is looking like a bust. Because
well, what are the chances you think one of those two things are going to happen? And you're as realistic as they come.
I think Barrett might have trouble coming back from the injury.
I think something's got to give.
I think Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is good. So
I think something's got to give. I also believe Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is good. I'm a fan of Shaq Barrett, but again, he kind of has not been the same guy since he's come back from the injury, and it's just it's been a nagging thing for
you
him.
Don't know. You
don't know. You're right. You don't know. You don't know. We didn't quite get the sample size we wanted in 2022. He was doing some positive things early on in the season, so let me give him credit. But we just have to wait and see. So I'm glad, though, that, I don't want to say I'm glad, but, I gave it a C+, and I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, this is a little stiff. You know what I mean? I wonder what Evan's reaction was going to be. And you come in with the C, man, you just stamp it on down. So
yeah.
I feel better about giving it a C+. I do think it is potentially a move that could have some upside, but again, banking on younger talent, all of the stuff we've said before. Moving on, I bring this guy up because following the trade of Shaq Mason, there is now an opening at offensive guard for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Maybe on both sides. We just have to wait and see. Aaron Stinney is back with the Bucs on a 1-year deal. A 2020 postseason standout. Stinney is obviously going to get a job to win a starting job at guard. I think he's going to get a chance. He got a bona fide chance before he got hurt last year. He was in the mix headed into 2021. Season-ending injury, it's going to be interesting to see what he comes back from, but I don't see any reason why he shouldn't get a fair shot. And being a rotational reserve guy who we know has stepped up in the past, barring injury, I think he is a depth piece that you could lean on if that's, worst case scenario for him headed into this year. I gave this move a B-.
Yeah, so I mean, Stinney's unfortunate. I mean, his season ended before it even started because he got hurt in the second preseason game versus Tennessee. And that was, I mean, 2 weeks earlier, Ryan Gento went down, and then Stinney goes down. You're
Oh
like,
yeah,
oh
that
man,
that set it off. I mean, we thought we were going to lose the entire O line by week 2.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it sucks for Stinney, but happy, that he's able to be back. Like you said, it's a major injury, so while it is going to be a long time removed from that injury, you never know how somebody's going to respond to that.
It was an Achilles, if I'm not mistaken.
It was ACL,
Okay.
and MCL, I think. Yeah, Shaq Barrett was the Achilles. So I mean, but it's a major injury. You don't know how he's going to respond, but yeah, it's a fine deal. It provides you, if he's the starter, okay. If he's not, it provides you depth, and if he's not good, then you just cut him. Like if somebody's better than him, then just cut him. So yeah, I'll give it a B. It's fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Stinney has played fine. He's a serviceable. I don't know if he's a full-time starter for you. I think you might get in trouble if he's starting all 17 games. But like if he can come in and and spot start I think I think he could be a really valuable piece. So yeah, it's a fine deal.
Yeah, and come training camp, when we talk more and more about solidifying a left and a right guard, I think the names obviously in the mix. Nick Leverett got to be in there. Robert Hainsey going to be in there. Aaron Stinney's going to be in there. Excuse me. Luke Gedeke may or may not be in there. We got to wait and see what happens. At right and left tackle as well. But I think after the draft we should get an answer on that sooner or later. Maybe around OTAs, which we are 10 days away from voluntary workouts at One Buck Place, if I am not mistaken. And then after that, we enter the dark times for a little bit.
Yeah.
After the draft, everything slows down just a little
After
bit.
the draft, it is the wasteland of news, and just you got about probably like I would say after a week after the draft, you still got some stuff to talk about. But then after that, the whole month of May, and then pretty much most like the whole month of June and like half of July is just nothing.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely planning to have some content for you guys, a little
Yes,
more
yes.
than we have in previous years. I will say here on the show, we've always been known, between the end of April and like the start of July, we'll put out like 3 or 4 podcasts. And I promise I will make a vow to you today on April 5th, 2023 at 3:32 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, not Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Time. That we are definitely going to do our best to bring you some more off-season coverage and get you through this final hump before we really start getting excited about football. But we also have spring football holding us over, right? XFL wrapping up here, USFL getting started in a couple of weeks. So it's definitely always on. Hockey playoffs right around the corner. Baseball is back. A lot to be excited about. But, something else we can surely be excited about are these last 2 signings that we're going to talk about today on the show, because you want to talk about value and retaining talent. These are the 2 best signings for me. I mean, they really are.
Real quick. Then let's just give
Yeah.
just quick because we'll talk about that. Just give the quick grade on Chase Edmonds.
Oh yeah, my bad. Oh, holy hell, we totally went around Chase Edmonds. All right,
Yeah,
so
just
for people
just
who are
do it
not
really
familiar,
quick. It's
yeah, former Denver, Miami running back Chase Edmonds. You potentially pair him up with Rashad White in 2023. Serious upside with this guy. You had talked about how you're a pretty big fan of him. He could be a reliable set of hands for whoever is under center. But personally, I don't know if I'm sold all the way on him as running back too. At least being as reliable and dependent on him as they may need to be. I don't know. I wouldn't rule them out drafting a running back early. But I gave it a B minus. I know that's kind of a common theme for me, but B minus is just what I felt about this one, and that's because I don't know. I don't know. He's one of those veterans like you had mentioned. 26, 27 years old.
Yeah, he's 26.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. Could be some upside, but he is a running back. And I don't know. I guess we just have to see how good Rashad White is, because if neither of those guys are good, then we're going to be in trouble.
Yes, I was wrestling with a C plus and B minus, so I'll go B minus too. Yeah, I think it's fine. And there's no, again, just like McLaughlin and stuff, there's no guarantee that he's the running back too. Like I do expect them to draft one. I don't know if it's gonna be early. Like I don't think it's gonna be Bijan Robinson or anything, but like, would it shock me on day 2? No, but like I would expect it more on day 3. But like, yeah, I do think they're gonna add somebody, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's fine.
All right. Let's wrap it up with these two signings as well. We could probably group these guys together before we mention the big two. Deidre Sanat was brought back on a 1-year deal. Pat O'Connor was brought back. Cam Gill at outside linebacker was brought back. Rotational talent for the Bucs, depth guys.
Yep.
Pat O'Connor definitely earned that contract, made a couple of big plays on special teams. Deidre Sanat for a rotational guy, I thought made more plays than I expected him to last year. So obviously glad to see him back. And then, Cam Gill is Cam Gill. He has shown us some upside before and kind of been a name that stuck around these past couple of years. But he is obviously back in Tampa Bay. So let's get into the two biggest signings, in my opinion. The first one is Lavonte David coming back, extending his career in the red and pewter with a 1-year deal. What more can really be said about Lavonte David? I mean, I poured my heart out 3-4 weeks ago, talking about how I could not bear to lose number 54. I could not live with myself if I witnessed him in another team's uniform. Luckily, I do not have to. But, as much praise as we give Lavonte David, and all of it is earned, in reality, I think we had kind of hinted on this before, probably didn't fetch the market price he expected. And to be honest with you, I do think he got more competitive deals, but with the deal the Bucs were able to give him, I think he was kind of happy to give him a break. At the end of the day, it's a team-friendly deal for the Bucs. I think he could have gotten paid more elsewhere. But I give this an A. I mean, it's your best defensive player back for another season. The guy has been a model of consistency, and to be honest, I really didn't see him slow down at all last year, so I expect more of it this year. It's a 1-year deal. If he wants to retire, if he wants to go after that big contract, we'll wait and see. But it was a stacked linebacker free agency class, and other teams were looking for linebackers, so I'm glad he's back.
Well, it was a stacked linebacker free agency class, but not a stacked linebacker draft class. So that's why it's really important that they were able to bring him back. And it just, whenever you discussed it, it just didn't feel right for him to end his career anywhere else. So, and it just isn't to say it's his last season. Like, he could play still. But, just like you said, he probably had some better offers on the table. He may have left some money, not too much, because at the end of the day, it's a business. So, like, if they're close, he'll lean towards Tampa, and that might have been what happened. But yeah, I mean, it's only a 1-year deal. So, yeah, again, pretty good value for the Bucs. So yeah, I'll go with an A as well. Just, it had to happen. So Lavonte David, very few guys nowadays play their whole career with one team, and Lavonte David's one of those guys, and it's deservedly so. Well, hopefully, as it plays his career with one team. It's looking more and more likely with this deal, because there was the real chance, like, Lavonte David might not be back, and now he is. So it's good to see.
Yeah, I mean, the cornerstone of this Bucs defense for a lot of years. So when it's all said and done, he will be one of the franchise legends, but obviously happy to see him back rocking the red and pewter for another year. You want to talk about potential cornerstones for this Buccaneers team and Buccaneers defense in particular. This is the home run signing of the offseason for me. The retention of Jamel Dean, not only to bring him back below market value, but to bring him back on a 4-year
to bring him back, period.
Deal. 4-year deal. I mean, we were telling people on this podcast, not just me, who is the eternal optimist. You were also telling people, James was on here telling people, hey, get ready. There's a storm coming. Jamel Dean, Lavonte David may or may not be here come training camp 2023.
We were talking about Lavonte David, like, okay, there's a chance.
Jamel Dean, I was sold that he was gone. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, he's going to go cash out. I'm happy for my boy. It is what it is. But this is a guy who made it clear with what he said he wanted to stay in Tampa. And for the price that they got him, like I said, well below market value, this move to me cannot be anything else other than an A+, because nobody expected it to happen.
Yeah, I'll go with an A. I wanted to give Lavonte David and Jamel Dean the same grade. So, but yeah, it's crazy. I didn't expect it to happen, and I was very surprised, and for the price too. And I think, I forget. I think it might have been Mike Garafolo said, like, the Bucs made their offer, and like, this was it. Like, this was as far as they could go, and Jamel Dean was able, able to work it out. So I'm sure he probably had some bigger offers, but I also don't think his market was what many of us expected it to be, because if it was, then I think he would have been gone. We were talking about him getting 17, maybe $18 million a year. And I mean, if he was getting those offers, he wouldn't have returned to Tampa. So, because like I said, at the end of the day, it's a business. But to retain Jamal Dean was huge. Keep their number 2 corner, one of the players who keeps progressing each year for the Bucs. And so now they don't really have to focus on a corner in the first round if they don't want to. They have that option now. And that's why I think a lot of this free agency has done for the Bucs. It's get their options at 19 and the rest of the draft pretty well open. They're not pigeonholed into anything. You could say maybe tackle, because they don't really have a solution at left or right tackle yet, depending on where you would, if you have Tristan Wirfs moving, if you have him staying. So that's maybe the one position where you're like, you need a guy there. Yeah, so far I really overall grade for the Bucs, though, I'll give them an A, honestly, for the overall free agency, just because while it's not groundbreaking, it's nothing groundbreaking, what they were able to do with the limited resources they had is why they earned that grade. So very impressive work.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just going to echo exactly what you said. I mean, the biggest topic headed into the offseason, is this massive cap hit that they're going to take, and this, $55 million over the cap of what they're looking at, the money that they're going to have to shed, the players they're going to have to get rid of. People looked at that free agent list and they're, everybody's crying, and, everybody's really, really upset. And, I would say the expectations were not great. People knew the Bucs were going to have to pay for it. And some people were obviously, maybe a little over optimistic. Like, I don't think any realistic person should have ever thought at any point we were going to go get an Aaron Rodgers. I do think there was a small enough chance for Derek Carr to, say that at one point I thought that was going to be the guy. But as time went on, you started to get a more realistic understanding of just how deep in the hole the Bucs were financially, and you knew Carr wasn't going to be an option. They were not going to be going after Lamar Jackson. But even with the signing of Baker Mayfield, Baker haters aside, you look at the value and you look at ultimately the team the Bucs are going to be able to field week 1. I mean, you're counting on a lot of best case scenarios here, but so is every team in the NFL. So it's like you have to count on a lot of things to go right, just as you do any team in a year. But, guys keep progressing. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka keeps progressing. You hope Jamel Dean keeps progressing. You hope Chase Edmonds can be a serviceable running back too, because if he's your starter, that obviously means something has gone wrong with Rachaad White, who you hope can play to the best of his ability. You hope whoever wins this quarterback competition can play to the best of their ability, whether it's Baker or Kyle Trask. A lot of these young guys on the defensive line, Shaq Barrett's not getting any younger, but you hope that he can play well coming back. Like, you're hoping for a lot of best case scenarios, but at the end of the day, I think, if everything runs the way that it should on a football team that is serious about winning games, the Bucs can be competitive. Are they going to be a Super Bowl? Are they going to be a Super Bowl contender? No, not at all. That's not what we're going to sit here and say. But I think, if really anything on that offense improves off of what we saw last year, I don't think you can count them out as a team that could sneak up and maybe win 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 games. But as of right now, that's my expectation for what their ceiling would be. But I get a much better feeling about this Bucs team now than I did before free agency. So I was going to give it a B+, but I will co-sign with Evan. I will give it an A, because I think if the Bucs can come out of the departure of Tom Brady and still field a team that can be somewhat competitive, then, I mean, that's a win. Because I think a lot of people thought it was going to be a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, that last sentence right there was pretty much it. Like, when you're like, oh, time's come, like it's time to start paying off the debts and stuff.
Party's over.
I mean, they kind of have. Like, I don't know. Like, they lost Mike Edwards.
Christmas kitchens closed.
Like Mike Edwards, Keanu O'Neal, like, okay. Sean Murphy Bunting departed, okay. I don't know. Like, they didn't really lose. Like, they signed their top 2 guys. They signed Anthony Nelson, and then they added a veteran quarterback for a competition, added some depth along the defensive line. added some running back depth, just added a safety. Like it's about as best as you can ask for with the circumstances. And if you were disappointed, like, hey, that's your opinion, but at the same time, I'm not sure what you were expecting. And it also could have been 10 times worse. Because the Bucs could have decided, hey, we are taking all the hits this year.
Right.
Levante, thank you, but goodbye. Jamel Dean, thank you, but goodbye. They could have. But yeah, and they want to remain competitive. They see how the potential of the NFC South. Like you said, are they a Super Bowl contender? No. Can they win the division? Is it likely? Maybe not. But can they do it? Yeah. Like it's not impossible. Like it is certainly not impossible. And just like you mentioned, a few things, have a few breaks go their way, a few of the younger players develop a little bit more. Obviously the two X factors I think are quarterback and offensive coordinator. If both those things are somewhat decent, you could have a 9-win team on your hands. And honestly, a 9-win team might be enough to win the division. So who knows?
Yeah, and obviously we have to wait and see. The first few weeks will be pretty telling, but on paper, when you look at this team across the board and you look at the departures, you mentioned a Sean Murphy bunting, you mentioned a couple of other players, Leonard Fournette, Donovan Smith. Obviously, left tackle, we have to wait and see. I'm not gonna say it's a foregone conclusion that the Bucs did not fall off a cliff at the left tackle position, but aside from quarterback and potentially left tackle, when you look at all the departures they've had, Josh Wells also, we forgot to mention that, no longer a Buck. I mean, he's a rotational guy, but it is what it is.
I don't even know. I don't know why the Jaguars signed him. He's not going to be ready to start the season.
I didn't realize he was entering year 10.
Yeah, he's not going to be ready to start the season.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think he tore his Achilles on Christmas night. Like he's not going to be ready.
I know. That's pretty brutal. But all of that to say, as far as free agency and the guys that left, the guys that replaced them don't feel like a massive drop off, aside from quarterback and aside from potentially left tackle. But if Tristan Wirfs is your starting left tackle week 1, then I don't know if we're going to be having this conversation. So, with that being said, I do think the Bucs came out of this in better shape than we all expected them to be. So an A grade for both of us. I like it, man. That Jamel Dean A+ really kind of swung it in my favor. We'll give it a end of the year assessment test curve. The bell curve that everyone has on the testing system sometimes. I don't know if you do that in your state. They do it down here in Florida every year because we're all dumb. But yeah, that's what we'll call that. I like it. Something Bucs fans can feel good about, and something that we're going to be talking about a lot more as everything develops heading into OTAs, voluntary workouts here in just a couple of weeks, and training camp this summer. Should be a lot of fun. But ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, I believe that's just about going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. You can follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find his written work at BucsNation.com and follow him on Twitter at EvanNFL. Any articles you have cooking right now?
Well, at BucsNation.com, all of us are doing our draft profiles. So currently, I actually just had Devon Witherspoon coming out today. Probably not going to be there for the Bucs at 19, but I did profile him. I also profiled Drew Sanders, but I mean, we got a bunch of prospects. Anthony Richardson's there, Tyjae Spears there. So head over to BucsNation.com to read all about them and, maybe get some insight on some potential Bucs draft picks.
Yeah, next time we talk to you guys on this podcast, we're going to get more into our pre-draft coverage, maybe some special guests. We'll highlight, obviously, some offensive and defensive playmakers the Buccaneers could look to target in the early rounds, even the later rounds. Hell, I mean, Evan loves his draft coverage, man, so you never know. Last but not least, you can find myself on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Instagram and Twitter, actually, not Facebook. All of those are Rhettakus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that's the show, folks. Like I said, next time we talk to you, we'll kick off our NFL draft coverage. Fire up the mock draft machine and get at us on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. Speaking of Twitter, I totally forgot to mention it. Let's close the show with this. This week's Bucs poll over on twitter.com/Rhettakus. You can participate in the weekly Bucs poll over there. We asked the people, how would you grade Bucs free agency? 32% of people gave it an A. 43% of people gave it a B. 19% gave it a C. and 6% give it a D or lower. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you're watching over on YouTube, what would you grade Buccaneers free agency? What could they improve? And, let us know. We love the feedback. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.